Hey y'all, and welcome to the 8th edition of the Birmingham Real Estate Market Update COVID-19 special. Today we're going to go through the statistics for the last week of the Birmingham real estate market. We're going to kind of circle back to some things that we noticed last week about the April numbers, and then we're going to cover some economic stimulus updates and a couple items that will hopefully help you if you're needing help in this kind of difficult quarantine lockdown time. My name is Rob.h.drum. I'm an associate broker at eXp Realty here in Birmingham. I've been making these videos every week to just keep us all up to date and keep our finger on the pulse of the real estate market here in Birmingham. So let's get started on the last week's numbers. First, let's update the previous week. Because as I check these numbers, they're live off MLS and they don't, everything doesn't get entered immediately on the day that I'm checking it. So we were looking at 441 closings for last week. That, when I went back and looked at it yesterday, was revised to 515 compared to the year before for the same week at 626. So slightly less closings. That's really the pattern that we've seen throughout this shutdown. As we're looking at it now, 8 weeks in, we've seen running at about 15 to 20% less closings, and we'll look at the effect on prices in just a second. But so this week, 263 versus 395. This will probably go up another 40 or so houses, maybe a little more when I look at it next week. Every week I look at the active listings and the contingent pending properties, and just kind of looking to see if there's any movement or trends in those numbers. This week we are right about the same as last week as far as active listings. The number of contingent pending properties went up about 150, which I think is a good thing. And really, throughout this, have not seen a huge trend or been able to gather much insight from this information here. So I wanted to circle back to something I noticed from, these are the April stats on our market. And what I've highlighted here is the average sales price was only up 2.89%. And what we've been seeing is more for this year is a number more in the 8 to 10% or sometimes even more range as far as year over year price appreciation. So this was kind of confusing. I think I may have hypothesized on what caused that, but I did some more research and this is what I came up with. That I know this chart is a lot, but I'm going to kind of go through it and explain what's happening, because I think it's happening in Birmingham, but it's also, I think, happening throughout the country in other markets and in the real estate market as a whole in the US, which is just an interesting phenomenon. So when you ask, is the market slowing? I think there's less closings, as we've talked about. I don't think prices are going down, but if you look on an average basis, there's kind of a discrepancy between an average sales price appreciation versus a median. Average is, if you take all the sales prices and get the average number. Median is if you rank all the sales prices and take the middle number of that ranking. So what we're looking at is if you take the extremes, so the top and bottom 1% of all sales for basically the whole COVID-19 period in 2019 versus 2020. I think I ended up going with 7 weeks of data. Here's the number of sales in 19, here's the number of sales in 20. And if you break that whole big data set up of sale prices and take the extremes, so the upper and lower 1%, upper and lower 5%, upper and lower 10%. These are the numbers that you come up with, and what this is illustrating is that there is, from 2019 in the top 1%, the spread between what it takes to be a top 1% of sales price versus a bottom 1% of sales price. So in 2019, that number was 964, but in that same period in 2020, we're looking at 905. So you're seeing like a reversion, like a contraction towards the middle in terms of activity, in terms of sales that are happening for that period. And what I think that is a result of, I didn't just stumble upon this. I've talked to a lot of agents, talked to a lot of lenders, and just reading news. And I think there was some disturbance in the upper and lower end of the mortgage market that I think threw off some closings in those price ranges and either delayed them or made them so they were canceled. But that's kind of how I started to figure out maybe what was going on. But once I pulled this data up, you can see in this chart kind of more easily that across each band of extremes, there was less activity. And that gets, as you get closer to like the middle of the market, that discrepancy gets smaller. So that's just something to think about. And I think this is happening in Birmingham a little bit. In a city like New York or San Francisco, I think it's happening a lot more. And it's also in listening to some interviews with national people who have data on national real estate searches and interest. I think it's actually happening if you look at the national real estate scene as a whole, there's people that are moving from higher end or looking at moving from higher end markets, higher price markets, to markets that are more kind of in the middle, like a Birmingham. So I think that may be a good benefit for us in the medium term. And then we'll get to economic and stimulus updates. PPP loans, I think funds are still available, which is pretty incredible. They kind of cracked down on the big companies who are taking multi-million-dollar PPP loans, the publicly traded companies. They kind of put some verbiage out there that scared some of those borrowers away and left more funds available for the little guy. So, and something that I really wanted to be sure to mention is that self-employed people are eligible. You don't need any employees. You don't need a payroll. If you have a 1099 contractor, it's a very broad description of who qualifies for PPP loans. And I wanted to be sure because I've had some people tell me they don't think they qualify. Actually, a couple people have told me they didn't think they would be eligible. And I told them that you are, and they applied and they got loans that will in all likelihood be forgiven. And it just really, a huge blessing for them. And I'm happy I was able to kind of point them in the right direction. So we've had a lot of success with that. If you need any direction or help on that, feel free to contact me. I'll put my information in the description here. Another thing that's coming, the HEROES Act, which is being voted on Friday the 15th it's actually the House. Then it'll go to the Senate, and then it'll probably get chopped up a bunch of different ways. But some of the things that are on the table that are kind of interesting, more $1,200 checks for stimulus. That's something that I think the president is behind, so that probably has a decent chance of getting passed. There's a lot of things in there for tenant relief that either programs to help tenants who need help paying rent. It's in the bill for no evictions for non-payment of rent, which I don't think that'll pass. That seems kind of extreme, but it's in there. And then there's also trying to clean up mortgage forbearance and make it more useful for people. They kind of set it up so you could get mortgage forbearance, and then it ended up messing up people's credit. It ended up, the rules were not implemented uniformly, and it was kind of a mess. So they're trying to clean that up in this bill. And yeah, so we're doing this every week, staying up to date on the market, interesting phenomenon happening in the market, different things happening with the economic stimulus and relief. So if you would subscribe to my channel, I'd really appreciate it, and I will see y'all next week.